I don't normally like to verbally deliver spoiler warnings before a video, but this film in particular is one which I don't want to ruin for anyone. On a personal note, it's one of my favorite movies, one of only two which have affected me on a deep, emotional level and changed the way I see the world. It won't do that for everyone, of course, but regardless, I highly encourage you to watch this film before viewing this video. I will be talking about the film in its entirety.
What do you want?
Why is this door locked?
I'm getting ready for school.
Max Landis's 2012 film Chronicle opens with Andrew Detmer angrily telling his dad that he's filming everything from now on. The first line in the screenplay tells us that this first scene is from Andrew's first camera. The second scene has Andrew telling his cousin Matt that he's filming everything. The fourth scene is Andrew explaining to a cheerleader that he wasn't trying to be creepy by filming their practice during lunch. The sixth scene has Andrew filming during a party and not telling anyone why, including Casey Letter, who's filming for her blog. So here's the question. Why is Andrew filming everything? Well, the film's original script gives us the main reason through some dialogue. For my mom, Andrew says, I'm trying to get custody of her from my dad. She's getting worse and he's not helping. And this way, in case something goes down, it'd be evidence. Andrew's dad is a full-on abusive alcoholic, and his mom is sick in bed, quickly approaching death's door. For an unknown amount of time, Andrew's been practically raising himself. He doesn't have any friends, with Matt being little more than Andrew's ride to school for the past while. Matt himself says later in the movie that the two weren't particularly close before the events of the film.
I mean, I didn't always.
What do you mean?
I don't know, you haven't always been super easy to talk to, you know?
The thing is, there's something wrong with this reasoning, and Matt himself brings this up in the original script after Andrew's explanation. But you're not with him right now, he says, but you're filming this. Andrew argues that it's context, but that's a fairly weak explanation. After all, not too long after, Andrew films the events of a high school keg party, something incredibly abnormal for Andrew's day-to-day life. One might say that this brief interaction was cut from the movie because it's not important, but there are other similar changes made to the start of the film which may hint at these revisions being more deliberate than simply cutting irrelevant dialogue. In the original script, Andrew tells his dad that he's specifically filming the drunken abusive behavior, but by the very existence of other scenes in the movie, we know that this statement isn't accurate, which is why it too was changed.
I'm filming this.
Huh? What?
I bought a camera and I'm filming everything from here on out.
The fact is, Andrew's not filming everything for his mom, his dad, or anyone else besides himself. Andrew's filming everything because that's the only way that he can express himself. He has no one to talk to, no one who will listen to how he feels or what he has to say. A camera, on the other hand, will always listen. It sees everything and hears everything within its grasp from the moment the record button is hit. From a filmmaking standpoint, placing the camera in the hands of the main character can serve to increase viewer immersion. This found footage film technique is used most frequently in horror, where it feels as if the scary stuff is happening to the audience and not just a fictional character. Chronicle isn't a horror film, however, and as such, the camera used here must be for something greater. Andrew's use of the camera in this film allows the audience to understand the nuance of Andrew's character. What isn't nuanced, however, is Chronicle's plot. In fact, the plot here is the textbook example of a tragic drama, or tragedy, and tragedies have existed for centuries in the audiovisual media space, having originated with Greek stage plays and arguably perfected and popularized by Shakespeare. The main difference between a tragedy and any other type of plot is the focus on emotional catharsis, or the release of pity and fear. Essentially, the plot serves to get the audience emotionally attached to the main character, make the audience pity and fear the main character after a climactic reversal of fortune, develop those emotions further, and then release them through a heart-wrenching conclusion. Tragedies hinge on the simple fact that audiences will relate to and sympathize with the main character. For disclosure's sake, this interpretation of tragic plot structure was conceived by Aristotle in his book Poetics, the earliest surviving record of in-depth media theory and analysis. The fact that Chronicle's plot fits this interpretation to a T works to its advantage. Its inherent lack of nuance isn't necessarily a bad thing. It also helps that this template is framed around topics which aren't commonly addressed within this type of narrative, the camera being one of them. The other is the main catalyst for the film's plot, a mysterious underground something which grants superpowers, specifically telekinesis, to main character Andrew, cousin Matt, and newfound friend Steve. Unlike many other superhero films which fail to explain the nature of the powers themselves, Chronicle goes into surprising depth about the nature of these powers.
It's elastic. If you stretch it too far too quick, it'll tear.
Ew.
That's why I think we're getting stronger, you know, because we're working it out, getting buff.
There are three aspects to these powers which are important to understand. First, the more telekinesis is used, the stronger it will get. Second, putting too much strain on the telekinetic ability will result in severe nosebleeds. Third, these three characters are linked through their powers, meaning that the other characters may experience some side effects if someone else strains their telekinesis. The rest of the film documents the trio's experimentation with and exploitation of this newfound ability, with one of them, our tragic hero Andrew, going too far. The real beauty of Chronicle's execution of the tragedy is that the audience probably won't realize it's a tragedy until really late in the movie. Even after the reversal of fortune, it's not clear whether Andrew's fate is truly sealed until the end of the final act. This means that a decent chunk of the film largely consists of some fun and fairly innocent antics. The film's most lighthearted moments come from the friends' mutual curiosity about the extent of their powers, whether it be the ball test, the fork test, or even simple moments like this.
How about this for a workout?
That isn't to say that tragedy doesn't happen before the reversal of fortune, but these comparatively less severe incidents serve to show that even at his nicest, Andrew has the capability to do incredibly harmful things and the potential to become an extremely powerful villain.
Shit! What the hell did you just do? Man, stop the car. Stop! Are you crazy? Pull down the rope. We gotta go down there, right?
This car crash is the first of these instances, which elicits a strong reaction from his friends. After the crash, Andrew constantly apologizes, saying that he didn't know what he was doing. In a later scene, he asks Matt whether he hates him as a result of the incident. He also wishes to avoid further embarrassment, attempting to intervene when Matt calls the police. But is Andrew really sorry for what he did? Did he actually not know what he was doing? Let's back up for a minute. Andrew notices Steve is complaining about a vehicle tailgating them. Then he asks if Steve could take the camera and point it at him. He then tells Steve to make sure Andrew's in the shot.
Gotcha. I can see you.
Okay, buddy.
We then see his deliberation, with Steve, channeling the audience, asking Andrew what he's going to do. After a long pause, Andrew slowly exerts telekinetic force on the car, using his hand as a physical representation of that force. Then, after seeing the effect the force has on the vehicle, he then speeds up while saying abracadabra, shoving the car through the guardrails and off the road. If this action isn't deliberate, I don't know what is. For the entirety of the film before this point, the movie has been largely viewed through Andrew's eyes. We established that Andrew's filming was a form of self-expression, but this expression wasn't focused on Andrew's actions so much as his circumstances. The focus of the filming was to document things that happened to Andrew, whether it be his dad drunkenly beating on him, the bully making fun of and abusing him, or the jealous guy at the party throwing a beer on him. Instead of retaliating, Andrew responds through his own documentation of these events. We, the audience, see what he sees. That said, there were moments earlier in the film where Andrew was on camera. We saw him in the mirror of his bedroom in the film's first shot. We saw him through the lens of Casey's camera at the party. We saw him through the lens of his friends after they insist he test out his powers. But this is the first time where Andrew tells someone else to film him directly.
Steve.
Around. Take the camera.
Point being, there is no way that Andrew did this accidentally, and there is no way that Andrew didn't know what he was doing. Andrew didn't just want to film his environment, he wanted to film his newfound command over that environment. This moment isn't the reversal of fortune, however, as Andrew immediately reverts back to his apologetic self while being shamed by his friends. This is why everything else in the scene is filmed like usual, with Andrew hiding behind the camera lens and the events on camera representing what's happening to him. Andrew doesn't want to stop being the star after this point, however, and he expresses this desire through his treatment of the camera. After his censuring, Andrew is shown in his bedroom filming himself by moving the camera telekinetically. While this is a great idea from a cinematic standpoint on its own, it's an even better idea from a thematic standpoint. Andrew uses his telekinesis to create physical space between him and the camera, framing himself while still controlling every aspect of the shot. When Andrew's confident, he wants to be the star of his show, and while this attention-seeking aspect of Andrew's character definitely has always been there, it's energized and fueled by other people for the majority of the film. The talent show sequence is the best example of this, as Andrew was initially hesitant to enter before being persuaded by Steve and convinced to use telekinesis as his talent. The show itself is a sort of representation of Andrew's plight as a character. It opens with Steve tripping Andrew without any retaliation. When the audience laughs at him, Andrew aims to prove himself to them, resulting in this smooth recovery. From there, the energy from the audience only fuels his passion further, resulting in a fantastic show for the unaware crowd. It's at the after party when Andrew really settles into the idea that his telekinesis could be the thing to improve his reputation at school, but a certain embarrassing moment knocks him back down effectively to where he was before the talent show. After getting mocked, Andrew returns home only to get abused by his dad once again. This time, however, he snaps and fights back, beating his dad to a pulp before slamming him against the wall and threatening to kill him. This is the turning point of the movie, in which Andrew lets his built-up frustration consume him. The real reversal of fortune happens right after, however, when Steve confronts Andrew in a lightning storm. Just before the scene, we see Matt through the lens of Casey's camera, who dismisses a nosebleed in favor of spending time with her. Steve didn't choose to ignore the nosebleed, however, and realized that something must have happened with one of his friends. Andrew rejects Steve's clear concern, believing that Steve only really cares about Andrew because of their shared superpowers. In spite of his high emotional state, however, Andrew recognizes that he doesn't have full control over what he's doing and urges Steve to stay away. Steve doesn't listen, and Andrew makes the mistake that will seal his fate. Steve's death irreversibly damages the relationship between Matt and Andrew, as Matt knows what happened and Andrew refuses to admit it. The scene appears to start with Andrew holding the camera himself, but once Matt tells Andrew to turn the camera off, Andrew flings the camera away and suspends it in the air before threatening Matt. Then, Andrew continues his apparent ego trip back in school, fighting back against the bully by telekinetically yanking out his teeth. We then see Andrew filming himself in the bathroom, enthusiastically explaining to the camera how he did it and what he needs to do in order to improve next time. The scene directly after this is admittedly a bit hokey, but is powerful nonetheless.
A lion does not feel guilty when it kills a gazelle, right? You do not feel guilty when you squash a fly. And I think that means something. I just think that really means something.
Despite his madness, Andrew still cares deeply for his mother. After tucking her into bed, Andrew attempts to pick up her medication, but can't afford it. He decides to rob the local street thugs, but with that not being enough, he robs a gas station instead. In this scene, the action is intercut between Andrew's camera and the security camera at the gas station. This technique is used a lot through the final act of the film, and was criticized by many as being a flaw because many of the shots appear impractical. In reality, however, there is only one shot which doesn't make any sense. This one. Every other shot can be reasonably explained by other events which are set up within the scene. To stress this point, I'll be putting the camera used for every shot in the bottom right of the screen for the remainder of this video. The use of many cameras like this is perhaps one of the most important developments in the entire movie. The film started from the perspective of one camera, Andrew's personal camera, with which he was filming everything but himself. Chronicle ends with every camera in the city pointing at Andrew with literal spotlights illuminating his presence. Let's take a few steps back though. Andrew ends up in the hospital after the gas station exploded, and his dad revealed that mom died. Andrew is blamed for the death and is told to sit up and apologize. Instead of apologizing though, Andrew grabs his dad by the arm, crashes through the wall of the hospital, and throws his dad towards the ground. Thankfully, Matt didn't ignore his nosebleed this time and catches Andrew's dad mid-fall. The original screenplay has Andrew pull his dad apart in the same way it pulls apart a spider earlier in the film, but I find this to be far more appropriate, as much as I and others may hate this man. Matt attempts to reason with Andrew, but both Andrew's strength and madness cannot be penetrated. Throughout all of this, however, Andrew deliberately takes actions to enhance the cinematic experience, the most substantial of which being his confiscation of an entire building's worth of cell phones, and by extension, their cameras. During this argument between Andrew and Matt, Andrew has this collection of cell phones orbit the two of them while he tells Matt about his supposed true nature.
I'm an apex predator.
The remainder of the action comes from a wide number of sources. Andrew's occasionally in control of these cameras, but the behavior on its own is enough to get the attention he desires. He doesn't have to worry about not being in frame like he did in the scene with the truck. Many shots in this final act don't have Andrew easily in frame, however, which seems counter to the point of Andrew's filming at first. In reality, however, these shots are in many ways reversing Andrew's intent. Just as Andrew was filming things that happened to him rather than filming things he did at the start of the movie, other cameras are used when showing the audience something which is happening to the user of that camera. When Andrew flips a police car upside down and throws it behind him and Matt, for example, the perspective used is the vehicle's dashboard camera. All of these changes with the cinematography serve to further distance Andrew from the camera. This shot from Chronicle's second scene is a really bad shot from a cinematography standpoint, but it adds personality to an otherwise flat scene. The camera shakes because it's being filmed in a car, and Andrew's nervousness and hesitation don't exactly help matters. At the end of the film, this personal touch almost entirely vanishes. Andrew's either controlling cameras indirectly by throwing them in his orbit, or not controlling them at all. He's instead focused on making a spectacle which draws attention towards him, such as the aforementioned spotlights, or simply by destroying various objects and creating some sort of wreckage. There's something missing from this though. If Andrew is drawing attention towards himself, then why does he say the exact opposite? Does Andrew really want these people to leave him alone? When Matt confronts Andrew in his room, he's told to leave, but in the confrontation in the city, Andrew's upset with Matt for abandoning him.
You left me alone. Andrew, you're not alone up here.
This behavior is fairly common among children and teenagers, in which the adolescent says they want something but actually want the exact opposite. In Andrew's case, his behavior is amplified because of the actions of his father, whose physical and emotional abuse conditioned Andrew to lose trust in everyone else in his life aside from his dying mother. This lack of trust is why Andrew believed that Steve didn't truly care. The only person who gains Andrew's trust in the movie is Matt, but in many ways this trust was falsely placed. This rampage can at least be partially attributed to Matt's ignorance and dismissal of Andrew's emotional problems. Even earlier in the film, most of Matt's actions were well intended but largely misguided. When Andrew knocks the truck off the road, Matt's response is the same sort of emotionally charged criticism Andrew associates with his abusive dad. The same response occurs after Steve's death. By this point in the movie, any trust Andrew had in Matt has all but dissipated. This is another reason why the focus shifts away from Andrew in the film's final act, to turn the perspective to that of Matt. Unlike the focus on Andrew throughout the rest of the movie, however, the purpose of this shift isn't necessarily to help audiences relate to Matt's character so much as his plight. Audiences may have mixed opinions on Matt's behavior, but they also know that Matt is the only one who can save Andrew at this point. In his madness, Andrew seeks different emotional responses from different people. Naturally, he wants his dad to feel pain, and is upset at Matt for catching him instead of letting him get what Andrew believes he deserved.
I dropped him. Why did you catch him? This is not a game. Do you understand?
In spite of this anger at Matt, what Andrew really wants from him is the sympathy that no one else in Andrew's family would provide, and Matt provides this in spades, doing his absolute best to try and de-escalate the situation.
Andrew, you're not alone up here. I'm here with you. I should have been with you all along, but I'm here now, and we can stop this right now, you and me.
But what about all those other people? The police, the general public? Does Andrew really want them to leave him alone? Of course not. Andrew's orbiting himself with random cameras. He clearly wants the attention. What attention he wants specifically, though, is subject to interpretation. It's possible that Andrew's drawing attention to himself so that someone could get him the help he needs, but instead is being treated like a threat, resulting in further anger and rampage. It's possible that Andrew created the spectacle specifically to get Matt's attention. It's possible that Andrew's just still mad about his dad and wants to watch the world burn, although that seems less likely given the deliberate acts to enhance the cinematic nature of his rampage. There's another possibility though, one that I find the most compelling. It's possible that Andrew's drawing attention to himself to live out a tragic narrative that he feels like a part of. Naturally, the pulling away of the camera from Andrew's perspective and closer to Matt's forces the audience to feel like their relationship with Andrew has become distant, and seeing him cause this destruction fuels a massive emotional response of pity and fear, the driving force behind a tragedy. Instead of this merely being a decision by the director or cinematographer, however, consider the idea of a character within the film's world deliberately making this decision themselves. Consider the possibility that Andrew aims to make his audience experience pity and fear, whether that be the people watching his film or watching firsthand. He's proving to everyone that he is beyond saving, and that if it wasn't for the man who he threw off a building, he might have been okay. By the end of their fight, Matt realizes this truth. His only choice for the greater good is to kill his cousin and let him rest. The biggest gut punch for me is the very last scene. For the entire movie, Matt kept telling Andrew to turn off the camera. Steve got used to the camera and kind of enjoyed it at times, but Matt really didn't like it outside of seemingly normal uses, such as filming the talent show. It's powerful then to see Matt bring the camera with him on his trip to Tibet. This location was one of very few things in the film which Andrew expressed true interest in. At the time it felt a bit ham-fisted, but given the relatively disjointed nature of many of the conversations, it didn't feel that out of place. Seeing Matt here shows that he chooses not to focus on the tragedy of Andrew Detmer, but the legacy of Andrew Detmer. His cousin suffered a lot in the time documented through this film, but there was a good heart in there, a smile, a witty comment, a laugh. While we as audience members may have seen everything, Matt chooses to focus on the part of Andrew's story which really matters, instead of letting the abuse and emotional turmoil set the narrative. Despite having to lose his life, Andrew won in the end. His dad will have to live with the grief that he caused, but the people who learned from their mistakes and tried to save him can move on and live the rest of their lives like a superhero. It's ironic, but the film Chronicle doesn't really chronicle anything. It doesn't aim to film a series of events in the way they happen. Instead, it deliberately chooses to frame the events of the story in a way that communicates something greater than it would have otherwise. It aims to tell the story of Andrew Detmer in the way Andrew Detmer wants us to see it. Unlike other films, Chronicle cinematography does far more than merely enhance the story. It tells its own story by contextualizing the camera in the world of the film and placing it in the hands of its central tragic hero. It not only allows us to relate to Andrew in a way we otherwise could not, resulting in emotional catharsis with his eventual death, but the characters who surround him and try to help him as well. Don't be fooled. Chronicle is not a movie about 3 kids getting superpowers. It's not a movie about power corrupting an innocent heart. It's not even a movie about the psychological effects of abuse. Or, at the very least, it's not about these things on their own. Most importantly, Chronicle is about the same thing the tool used to film it is about: perspective. By telling its story through in-world cameras, audiences get a much greater understanding of the psychological complexity of its protagonist, resulting in one of the most interesting character studies to hit the big screen. Oh hey, it's Daft Punk. So thank you so much for watching this video about Chronicle. It's a script that I actually struggled a lot with for a very long time, because emotions are really hard to deliver in that way. And I'm not an actor, so I really don't know how to do that. But I think I did do it in the end. The big person I need to thank is Rem Sorpax, because he helped me a lot with this script. He does gaming analysis mostly, but he mentioned interest in film analysis as well, which is why he helped me out with that video. So I really appreciate his contributions, but all other contributions and credits are on the credits over top of Daft Punk here. Hope Daft Punk's not offended. Are you offended, Daft Punk? I'll take that as a no, but maybe they are. Maybe they are, because they don't talk. They're a poster. So I want to plug some videos before I go, and then I'll leave you to it. I did another video about, more like cinematography kind of stuff. I was talking about plot structure, but I was talking about South Park. And that video is not available on YouTube, probably won't be available on YouTube for a long time, but it's available on VidMe, so the link to that is in the description. I want to plug my reviews video because I'm really, really proud of it, even though no one cares. No one cares what I think about reviews, because I'm just a college student. I'm sitting in my bed right now. But whatever, if you're interested in it, I think I made some good points. Maybe it'll change the industry in 20 years. Probably not, because I'm me. And then lastly, I want to plug my 3D Mario video, because that's another video I'm pretty proud of. I put a lot of time into that one. And the next video I'm going to be doing is about a video game too, and it's also a platformer. So, hey, but don't worry, if you're into the film thing, if you're just a film guy, I get it. There's going to be more film stuff coming soon. I have a bunch of ideas already in my noggin right here. I don't know why I keep doing the snap business, but like, I kind of like it. I don't know, it's just a little, yeah. I guarantee the credits are done by now. I'm gonna peace out, fam. And tragedies have existed for centuries in the audiovisual media space, having originated with Greek stage plays and arguably